Patricio Pitbull defending his featherweight belt at Bellator 252 against Pedro Carvalho. I mean, a lot of people are saying this guy is one of the best featherweights out there. In the featherweight GOAT conversation in some cases. Matt, what's your take on this? I mean, he made quick work of Pedro. I know we're early in this tournament still, this featherweight Grand Prix, but he made it look easy.
No, he did make it look easy. I mean, he made it look really, really easy. Like Carvalho had nothing, like no business being in there with him. As far as the GOAT conversation goes, that's an interesting one, which we're going to dive into here in just a little bit. But he's by far the most accomplished in Bellator, under the Bellator banner, right? I could run down a list of some of the accolades that he has just in Bellator. His 9 championship wins are the most in Bellator history. 19 wins, most in Bellator history. I was 18 in featherweight, 12 stoppage victories. Are just behind Michael Chandler, who has one more than him. What else? 11 stoppages in featherweight history, tied with AJ McKee, who's a beast in his own right. But he's one of the most exciting fighters under the Bellator banner. I mean, that's not really up for debate at all. Like for me, like I thought this was going to be a nice fight for him to go out there and display his skills, continue to go on with the Grand Prix. And he just went out there and just steamrolled Carvalho. I did not see that coming. I thought it was going to be a nice little, maybe 2-rounder, maybe a decision. I don't know. But a finish like that caught me off guard.
Yeah, it's definitely impressive, for him to go out and make Carvalho look the way he did is it's a thing of beauty, and it's a thing of just like, man, he's got to be good, right? There's no denying his accolades, especially in Bellator. He's the Bellator GOAT. If you're talking about the Bellator only GOAT, he clearly takes that mantle, I would imagine. I can't think of another fighter who's been under that promotion who's done as much as he has.
No, yeah. It's just like some people are going to get confused on that because they're going to think we're talking about out of all of the fighters in their careers. No, we're talking about strictly what they've done in Bellator. Right. There's nobody that really compares to him, right? Across the board, the champ. Like we said, yeah, there's nobody compares. Yeah, sure, there you can have an argument like guys like like Fedor and obviously like that. I mean, if you take in the totality of their career, what they've done in Bellator, it's not really an argument. Like Pitbull is the guy when you're talking about that stuff. And I mean, just look at what he did on Thursday evening. Like that just sums it up right there.
Yeah, it's extremely hard to debate. Before we go any further, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. Let us know if you think somebody else is the Bellator GOAT, because that would be, I'd love to have that conversation with anybody just to get a different perspective, because everyone I know says he's the Bellator GOAT. As we move on to the featherweight GOAT, right? Let's go across promotions. Now it becomes a little bit murkier. Where do you rank Patricio Pitbull in terms of the featherweight GOAT conversation?
That's a lot tougher one, man, because we live in an MMA world. This is like the one advantage boxing has over MMA. The one is cross-promotional fights can happen and do happen all the time. This is where it gets murky in MMA because you have guys like Pitbull who are just dominating their division under one banner, and everyone starts that question of, oh, how would he do against the UFC champ? Oh, how would he do against, the one champ? We'll never know. Like, well, okay, Bellator in 1, that can actually happen. We've seen it happen, right?
Right.
UFC, it's not happening. UFC is not going to do promotional thing. As you know, it's one of those pipe dreams that everybody wishes upon a star to happen. It's just never going to happen. Never going to happen. The UFC is the UFC. They built that brand protecting those 3 letters. They're not going to let another brand attach themselves to theirs and put one of their stars at risk to lose a fight to the other guy. It's just not going to happen. So it sucks because we will never get these answers because obviously Bellator is going to hang on to Pitbull. Pitbull's going to want to stay at Bellator, right? If they keep treating him right. Why would you want to leave? To answer this question? To answer this question, how good are you really? Look, I'll give you an insight to me. Like in my personal opinion, Just going by where he's ranked on Tapology, just to kind of put it in perspective, Tapology has him the 23rd best featherweight fighter. I don't know if I'd put him that low, but I'd definitely say if he were to go over to the UFC and fight any of those guys in the top 15, I would say anybody in the top 10 is a very, very interesting fight under the UFC banner. Very interesting fight that he could let take an L.
I mean, I'm with you. It's one of those things where back when the UFC antitrust lawsuit started, a huge part of it was when you're talking about monopoly power, is that they specifically went out and gathered all of the top 5, top 10s in the world that they had through various ranking systems and specifically got those guys under contract so that they could be branded as the best of the best. And in some cases, you've had Bellator champs like Eddie Alvarez come over, struggle, but, let's not forget, he lost to Donald Cerrone. There was the very close fight against Pettis. And then he ends up going on to beat Dos Anjos for the belt and then drops it immediately after. But nonetheless, he could still hang with those top guys at the time, right? And I think Patricio could certainly hang with the top 15, top 10. But when you're talking about the top 5, that's a whole different story. And people want to say after this, I saw a lot of people after this particular win saying, man, he's got to be up there as one of the greatest featherweights of all time. Let's take a look at Pedro Carvalho's record, right? The first thing I did after this was let me go investigate a little bit. His best wins are in Bellator, and probably his whole career, are Sam Sicilia and Derek Campos. Let's not forget that Derek Campos is 1-5 in his last 6, and Sam Sicilia is 2-6 in his last 8. We're not talking about elite level competition here. We're not talking about AJ McKee's where it's like, okay, you go out and you do that to AJ McKee. Now you've got my attention. Now I'm looking at you and saying, okay, maybe you are in that top 5 conversation. But Patricio was supposed to go out there and flatline him. If it had been a very competitive fight, back and forth would have been very close, that would have called into question, Pitbull's run a little bit, to be honest. And it's one of those things. I think he could do very well 5 through 10. I'd love to see those matchups. 10 through 15, yes. Any of them I think are competitive. I think they're good. You get into the top 5, I look at those guys, and I don't see any right now based on Pitbull's resume where I can say like, oh yes, he is competitive with any of them.
Yeah, that's where it gets really, really tough, man. To say he's the best in the world, like Scott Coker was saying, immediately after the fight. I mean, look, he's a promoter doing his promotion thing, right? Which you love to see it. You love to see it. Contrast that with Dana, who's going to find a way to trash the main eventers in any way, shape, or form. Uriah Hall knocks out Anderson Silva, and all of a sudden Uriah Hall didn't pull the trigger quick enough. Like, what? Oh, yeah. He just finished. He just got to finish. Like, okay. Anyways, you're looking at the top 5. You got Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, Zabit, Yair Rodriguez, Chan Sung Jung, Korean Zombie. It's not gonna look pretty for Pitbull. I think he stays competitive for a little while. I don't think he goes in there and gets waxed like Carvalho did but I think that those fights, if they were to ever in our wildest dreams do some sort of cross promotional fight, I mean, if you want to do the champ versus the champ in the UFC, I think Volkanovski waxes it, and I don't think it's even close. I mean, I'm sorry, like no disrespect to Pitbull or anything, but I think Volkanovski waxes it.
Yeah, I'm with you in that opinion. I think it's not even close at all. I think Holloway also just beats Pitbull down myself. And, I'd love to see it. It's never going to happen. Any of you watching this that think that there's going to be cross-promotional fights, I know you've talked about the IMMAF trying to get, MMA in the Olympics. Let me tell you right now, if they do, UFC is not going to send anyone. That's not going to happen. That would risk their brand name. They will never cross promote in any form or fashion. It's just never going to happen. And so at this point, I think it's going to end up being a Michael Chandler situation where if, Bellator's, maybe been there for Pitbull for a while, but he really wants to test himself. He fights out his contract. He loses the belt. He goes to UFC. I can see that, but otherwise, we're never going to really know. I also think a very good gauge of Pitbull is going to be how well Michael Chandler does. Everyone's talking about Michael Chandler as a top 5 lightweight contender. He's right in there. He should be fighting Poirier or Ferguson, all these people. Let's not forget, yes, he did dust Benson Henderson in his last fight, but he also fought a very close fight with Benson Henderson not that long ago. He did get starched by Pitbull. I was there ringside. I know Chandler likes to disregard it, but I mean, it was pretty clear he was hurt. We'll see how he does in the UFC, but if he ends up being a, dare I say, Ben Askren, where super hype comes in, gets a win over, an older guy who's clearly on the downside of his career and then just, flails around and loses a bunch, I think that diminishes Pitbull's win. If Chandler goes in there and, starches or just soundly beats Ferguson, Poirier, any of those top 5 guys, I think that raises Pitbull's stock, and I think he's viewed as a higher fighter. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, it sounds great. I mean, like you if he were to come into the UFC and do like what Eddie Alvarez did, right? If he had that kind of journey, come in and steal the strap out of nowhere, I just don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening, man. I mean, I think the talent in those divisions are just that much better. I think it's clear, like, especially at 155, they've been having to deal with Habib. Like, their games are on a whole other level right now. You know what I mean? And it's just, I think that part of that, I'm not saying that he's not necessarily getting a push in the gym per se, but when you're the best, like in your divisions by far under your promotional banner, maybe you don't go that extra round in training, but if you're in the UFC, you got Habib holding that strap, maybe you overtrain a little bit. So, I mean, that's just something to keep in mind as well. But I just, it sucks, man. Going back to what I was saying at the beginning, it sucks because we're never going to have the answer to this question. So it's just going to be a fantasy matchup to debate for forever and ever.
I will say, we will never have that matchup unless there are rumblings about the Ali Act coming back. We do have a new administration coming in. If the Ali Act gets passed for MMA, I think that changes the whole game, and that's a much larger conversation. Then you might actually start to see that. But let's assume that's not going to happen. Let's assume it's, politics as usual, not going to be a thing. But let's also assume that Pitbull is the champ for a while. Let's say he loses his belt to an injury, like he has, against Benson Henderson, right? He got that leg injury, he's out. Let's say he loses one or both of his belts to an injury. He's a free agent. He decides to come over to the UFC. Who would you have him fight? Who in your mind, if Pitbull says, you know what, I'm vacating the belts, I'm done, Bellator, we're just done with all this. He gets released. I know this is all a pipe dream, but let's say he comes over to the UFC just like Chandler did. Who would you have him fight? Because I think that's an interesting question in and of itself. Is right now you take that Pitbull, who do you match him up with in a dream scenario?
Well, considering how the UFC doesn't typically do favors to Bellator fighters when they rarely do come over, put him against Chandler and let them eliminate each other.
All right, let's do this because I'm with you there. That'd be incredible, actually. That'd be amazing. And yeah, that's a very good point. Well, okay, but let's say he's going to stay at 145. Let's say he comes at 145. Pick somebody there because let's be honest, he's beaten Chandler, but he's not fighting at 155 regularly. Well, 145 is his weight class. So let's say he comes over, refuses to fight Chandler at 155, and gets iced because of it, because that's a typical UFC thing to do. Then who do they put him up against next?
All right, so they're going to do this then. He's a guy, obviously, who would just be dropping a title. So they're going to use that to prop him up, like they did Michael Chandler, right? So you're thinking top 5 range, right? I think if he were to come over to the featherweight division and schedule him a fight, I mean, you don't put him in the title picture right away. I think you do. You think you do Yair. I think you do Yair.
Yair, okay.
Because that's a guy that a lot of people know. A lot of people are excited to watch him. The Hail Mary knockout on Korean Zombie, everybody knows and loves. I think that would be a good gauge. I mean, based on where they would have to place him, right? Because they're going to have to place him in the top 5. I think a real good gauge in general, just to see where he's at in UFC level wise, shoot, you could throw him in there against like Bryce Mitchell or Edson Barboza, like 14 or 15, you know, like that would be a good gauge. Go in there and can you beat older Edson Barboza? Can you finish him? Okay, cool. Go ahead and get that dub and then we'll shoot you in the top 5. That's what I would do, but that's not what the UFC would do.
Yeah, no, I think so. I have my dream matchup, and then I think what the UFC would do. My dream matchup. I don't want to hear anything else. Literally no other suggestion than Pitbull versus Korean Zombie. I want to see that so bad. It's not even funny to just see because, you know, Zombie's going to keep walking forward. And if he gets rocked and gets hurt, that's a whole other deal. But I mean, to see that matchup for as long as it lasts would be just incredible to me. That to me is all I want to see. But where I think realistically they probably put him in at, if they want to really gauge him, as you said, is I think they throw him in against Jeremy Stevens. I think that's, you know, he's number 8 in the rankings, tied with Arnold Allen. Inexplicably, they're both number 8. I can't. I don't know if you're a part of. I know a couple of rankings members, panel members, watch this show because I've talked to them once or twice. So if you're watching this right now, please explain to me why that happened because I'm confused as to how that happened. But Jeremy Stevens is a game fighter, will throw down with Pitbull, and that's a good test to see again. I would imagine if the hype of Pitbull is true, I'd imagine he runs through Jeremy Stevens. I bet first, second round KO. It's a brawl, and Pitbull just runs through him. That's what I would imagine would happen if this champ, greatest of all time, Bellator is just as equal as UFC narrative is true. If he struggles against Jeremy Stevens, then yeah, I think that says a lot about where he's at, where Pitbull, or really Bellator's whole featherweight division is, right? If he's able to run through these people in Bellator and then he has trouble against Jeremy Stevens, that's saying something. Just because Jeremy's had some trouble against the elite competition. He's lately had a lot of elite competitors and he's fallen short. So if you can't get past him, how are you going to get past Yair? How are you going to get past Zabit? You know, so I like those fights. I think realistically, again, they throw me against Stevens or someone in that range, but all I want to see is Korean Zombie versus Pitbull, man. I think that's a banger of a fight right there.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. And, you know, these conversations are only just going to ramp up even more if he goes up there and wins the Grand Prix. I mean, listen, he's got a hell of a rematch coming up, man, even in the Grand Prix against Emmanuel Sanchez. I like Emmanuel Sanchez's game. I know this isn't an Emmanuel Sanchez video, but man, that dude is one to watch. So all you Bellator fans out there, or just, you know, UFC fans that don't really watch Bellator, if you're listening to this video, do not miss that fight, man. That's going to be special.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Emmanuel Sanchez is, you know, next to AJ McKee is Pitbull's toughest fight in that tournament. And especially the clinic Sanchez put on White. I mean, that was just, you look at how far he progressed from that first Weichel fight to what he did this past Thursday is insanity. So I'm looking forward to that as well. I think that's going to be a good gauge of where Pitbull is and how far Sanchez has come. And next to AJ McKee is Pitbull's biggest test. So that you definitely don't want to miss that fight.
100%. Yeah. Listen, we're talking about the UFC crossover, but hey, like we said, man, he's got two tough opponents still in Bellator to get through. Now, if he goes out there and finishes both of those guys, okay, then maybe these UFC crossover conversations make a lot more sense. But he has to look really, really impressive against those two guys first before we start talking about like, oh, he's the best in the world. Little bit premature there, Scott Coker. But I mean, I feel you. You're doing your job.
Yeah, I mean that's the job of promoter. As you know, my Fight Business podcast this week, shameless plug, is with old John Nutt of Fight Circus, and you need to hear what that man has to say about his fighters because best in the world all day. Jamaica, Indian, a female bodybuilder named Jamaica who is an Indian leg wrestling champion. It's a whole. I can't even. You got to watch the video. It's something else. But promoters are going to promote, right? That's what you do. So I understand what Scott Coker is saying there. And one day, I hope Pitbull does come over to the UFC, or we get an extension of the Ali Act that allows for cross-promotional fights without all of the, boxing issues that come with that we've seen in boxing. What I want to ask you guys watching this video is, if you could take Pitbull and put him against anybody in the UFC right now, who would it be? So we've already talked about, is he the Bellator GOAT? Let us know about that. But then also, if you could match make, who do you think Pitbull should go up against in the UFC if he were to cross over? Because I want to hear your guys' opinions too. It's featherweight is a deep division. So there's so many good matchups.